Hello, and welcome to another recording of a conversation between me and my teaching assistants for this course, who are also students of MA at IIT Madras. I have with me Ms. Sanjana and Mr. Akash here, and we're going to talk about the second half of this course and cover some of the most interesting themes in terms of larger issues that are at work in the Indian society and which get reflected in the short stories as well. So, what we're going to do is first begin with the short story Reflowering by Sundar Ramasamy. I'm going to read a particularly interesting extract from the story and we'll begin the discussion from that extract. So, this is what I want to share with you. So we have a dispute, that's happened between Router and Appa, who runs the textile business, and the child narrator, the son of the businessman, is narrating the story, and this is how he reads the situation. The boy says, the dispute between Appa and Rauta had started mildly enough the previous evening. Look here, Rauta, what are you going to do if you let your debts keep mounting like this? Appa had asked. Appa's question had been provoked because Rauta had chosen clothes for his entire family and piled them up by his side before thinking of asking Appa for credit. It was quite clear that Appa did not like this. What can I do, Ayah? My house is full of women. My sons are useless. My sons-in-law are useless. 4 sons, 4 daughters-in-law, 8 granddaughters, 8 grandsons. How many is that? If I gave them just one item of clothing apiece, even then the cost is high. So I'll stop there. What do you make of this extract, Sanjana?
I think it's very interesting because, see, Rauta is going through a lot of financial troubles and this and that, but at the same time, he considers it very necessary to give his family this piece of clothing. And also, during times of crisis, he says his sons and son-in-laws useless because we never see them, we never hear of them, we don't know what is happening with them. Generally, the burden is, carried off by the sons, but here we see none of that, so that's something I
Quite
find
right, quite
interesting.
right.
And,
Yeah.
I think that just like Appa is a patriarch in his house and also in the shop setup, Roger is also a patriarch in his house, and this sentence pretty much reflects it.
Yeah,
really
absolutely, absolutely. He somehow seems to be proud of the fact that he can provide
Yes.
for all the members of his family. And it's a massive family, it's a big family, right? Lots of sons, lots of sons-in-law. And none of the sons-in-law seem to be very responsible enough to look after this large family. What are the other perspectives in terms of this man and the crisis that is enveloping him? Can we talk more about it?
Yes, ma'am. But before that, because we actually talked about this, I think this relationship between the shopkeeper, or basically the uh, here Appa and Router, who is the servant, and then the servant and his family, and the parallels between them, it's a very common theme in Indian literature, and we've
Right.
come across this in many other stories, especially in the Flood as well. So, ma'am, would you like to talk about it?
So the parallels between Router and Appa. The funny thing is, Appa is very, very short-tempered, and that doesn't seem to be the case with Router. He has this very benevolent, benign attitude towards his entire family, and he doesn't seem to have any sense of irritation or annoyance, despite the fact that he's shouldering this big burden on his, on his entire self. So that's very striking. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the fact that the family is at the heart of the crisis for this man, right? That's why I read out this extract, because the root cause of all the problems seem to be contained within this extract, this conversation by Ravata, where he mentions that the sons are useless and nobody is there to, run the family except himself, and the family seems to be causing the financial crisis, right? So that is indicated in this particular extract. Right.
Another thing that I think one of the major themes of this story is technology.
Yeah.
And technology, and as well as change, like how lives change. in time. That's a very very striking theme of the story. So basically, how Rouser changes himself to meet the necessities of the time
Yeah.
is something that is very moving.
Yeah, yeah. Do
Yeah,
you want to
I-
comment on that?
Yeah, it just like it raises questions of like maybe for humanity, maybe when you have new technology, does it mean that it's obsolescence or like it just puts people out of work or they have become irrelevant, or like in this story shows that Rathas, he again has a reflowering and he goes back up. So do humans have the capacity to go beyond and reinvent themselves in the face of technology?
Yes, absolutely. That seems to be happening, obviously, because we have the intrusion of technology in the object of this calculator, and that moment in the story, he just touches that object. He touches its front, he touches its back, and he asks, "Is this the thing that is doing all these calculations?" And the girl Gomati says, "Yes, Tata, yes, it's doing it." And then he says, "You keep it. I don't want to do anything to do with it." And he rejects that object, even though that has come to replace him, and it does replace him even at the end of the story. But the funny thing, or the most interesting thing about Rauta is that he has this battle of wits with that object, and he comes out as the winner because he reinvents himself. He kind of finds a new personality for himself. He somehow supersedes, and he no longer becomes obsolete. So it seems as if this object, this technology, is pushing him to become better and better, and human beings are good at that. We have that evolutionary
definitely so.
proof
And
to show that.
definitely
Right?
so, ma'am. And the most important thing is that he assumes a position which is actually superior to what he was doing earlier.
Absolutely.
He's now a manager. And
Yeah, and the funny thing, you wanted to bring up that last line in the story, isn't
Yes,
it?
ma'am.
Do you want to read that
Yes,
for the
ma'am, sure.
audience?
Ibrahim Hussain Rouder is no longer a mere adding machine. He is now the manager. It is God's will. Rouder
Yeah.
replied.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it in my lectures too. For the first time, we get the full name of this old blind man, and he utters his entire name with a lot of pride, isn't it? And what does that indicate? It indicates that he's no longer a mere adding machine. He has a personality, and he seems to come out as someone who is kind of on top of everything, right? Who can manage each and every aspect of the shop, including the boss himself, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to mention some details with regard to that?
See, that also shows that maybe he was not particularly happy with, he calls it a mere adding machine, so it shows his attitude towards maybe his previous job. We never found out whether he disliked or liked it,
Yes.
but now we get an inkling of now he thinks he's superior because
Yes.
he is not just doing calculations, he's not doing the calculations, but he's taking care of so many other aspects. He's making sure Appa pays the bills
Yes.
and like takes care of his wife and things like that.
Yeah, and the point that you made, that's very interesting, because we don't know whether he liked his job, but we know that he's really good at it. So that is established in the story, and now he sees himself as having been promoted to a higher level, right? He almost becomes godlike in the way he directs, manages everybody. There's a directorial aura to him, and he quite enjoys that, the way he can lord it over the other people in the store. So that really comes through in the story. So family, the point that I want to get across to the audience is that there are complexities in the way a family is run, and that's evident in the story. And it also shows how the family could be at the heart of several financial crises, and how the feudal setup also adds to the burden of this blind old man. So we have a family where the women can't work. So we have a family even when the men can't work, the older father figure has to take up the responsibility. He can't just shirk responsibility and say, get out of the house, go and make money on your own. So all those complications are evident in this particular story. So how family is binding in some sense, right?
And it's something very Indian. So
Yes.
again, the theme of Indian literature here.
Yes.
It
So
definitely comes
yeah,
up.
quite right. So the family is at the heart, isn't it? It can be a dysfunctional family, it can be a very functional family, it can be a happy domesticity, unhappy domesticity, but you can't get away from it. It's like the basic unit with which we work, right? So that's quite evident. So what are the other themes that we can think about that are very, very striking in terms of the other stories that we've covered in the second half of the course? Can we talk about the Shroud?
Sure. In society, actually, Madhu and Kisu are oppressed, but in the household, it's Bhutia who is oppressed. Actually, yeah, definitely so.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation, and not many people make a note of that because the general criticism about the story is that either it is a anti-Dalit story or it is a story that kind of lays bare the oppressions of the Dalits in the Indian society. But we somehow forget the absent woman or the marginalized woman who's at the heart of the story, Budhya, with whom the story begins, and the death of the woman is somehow celebrated within quotes by these men. In fact, the final lines of the story are about that. They say that she has fulfilled our dearest wish by dying, and she will of course go to heaven. So those are the words uttered by one of the men in the story. So the woman rarely gets noticed, and that's very interesting because oppression has been endured by this woman to a great extent, and that needs to be noticed and talked about, right? And do you want to comment further on this fact? The way the woman is marginalized, that is kind of drawing parallels with the other marginalization that happens in terms of caste, in terms of color, in terms of other marginal issues, right?
Yeah.
So, ma'am, this actually is a theme across all these stories. Most of the stories we saw it in summer vacation, and not in summer vacation, but in the flood, and we saw it.
We can also see it in
yeah.
summer vacation in the case of Nani Amma and Ammani, right? They seem to be marginalized and somehow associated with the dark room, right? Vadakini, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that marginalized room has associations with marginalized people, with dark women, and women who don't have men in their family, right? Amanema and Nani seems to be without menfolk to look after them, right? So those associations are also there. You're quite right.
And ma'am, rather than just putting it across like that, we can also see it as like two layers of operation, and whatever those two layers are, most of these stories have two layers of operation, and that adds to the sophistication of the story.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, quite right. I mean, if I can pick up from what you have said, we have Mutashi, who is the feudal landlord in some sense, within quotation, and somehow or the other, there is some kind of oppression going on if you look at the class angle, and at the same time, she also acts in a benevolent way, just like the landlord in the Shroud. He offers money because he has to take care of the funeral expenses. So benevolence is combined with exploitation in some sense, and there are other layers of exploitation, and sometimes these intermingle. All right, so we need to be observant of that too.
Yeah.
Ma'am,
And
so ma'am, when you say that food is actually the theme of the Shroud, it's interesting and it's surprising as well.
Yeah.
Because the many other things as well in the story, the theme of death, and then the theme of caste operation
Yes.
and everything. But why do you think, ma'am, is that food is the most important theme?
The reason is pretty obvious. The most important motivation for these two men is how to get the next meal, right? And even the beginning of that story with Buddha making blood-curdling cries inside the hut is combined with them roasting potatoes outside the hut, and they don't want to step in and check in on her because they're worried that the other person will finish off the roasted potatoes. And there are constant references to these men, scavenging for food, right? Tilling out stuff from other people's fields, sucking on sugar canes, fantasizing about that meal that they had long back. And sometimes when I reread the story, I'm also wondering whether this actually happened or is just a fantasy that he has created for himself, just like Muni creates a fantasy of a daughter giving him money for his 50th birthday. So I wonder whether he has created that idea in his mind and he wants to recreate it in reality, which will happen once Buddha dies and the other people contribute money for a shroud. So it's a very, very apparent motive that somehow seems kind of, submerged because of other very, very apparent ideas about, Dalit issues, or the exploitation of the landlords, how chiefs come into creation, how con men are created, and other things, and how Buddha is ill-treated, how she feeds these two men, and how she does the job and still she gets, rejected by them and not cared for. So all these themes are there, and these are important. I'm not rejecting them, but at the heart of the story is starvation, plain starvation, and these men have starved for ages, and that's why all their concentration is on how to get food. What do you make of that?
Ma'am, the thing is, I can take that with, like, they are ready to give the Shroud money and they get food. And that brings me to the topic of the Shroud itself, because it represents more than just the cloth. It represents a whole series of tradition.
Yes.
And you can see Madhav and Gisu try to, like, maybe break it or rebel or whatever it is. They go and they decide to buy food, buy meal, and throughout their entire life they're using resistance.
Yeah, resistance. That's a good word. They're resisting it in a very, very subtle manner. It's a very diplomatic resistance, and they kind of exploit the tradition for their benefit, in the sense that they get a really good feast out of it, and they still believe that these traditions will be maintained by the entire village, because that's how things are done. These rituals have to be carried out in order to keep the fabric of the society together. So they know that she'll ultimately get a shroud, and they will also get a meal out of that, right? If she dies, and she does die,
Ma'am,
right?
it's a very important note that you said it's a subtle resistance compared to an outright revolt.
No,
They've not
yeah.
revolted. It's
No.
a very subtle resistance.
Yeah, and that becomes clear when Gisu goes to the landlord, someone who he doesn't see for days together, and somehow he goes and falls at his feet and says, "You are my lord. You are a father to me. Kindly help me in this moment of distress." And he knows that this is all a sham, but still he has to do the right thing, in order to make sure that the society stays together.
And the landlord, like, even though he despises Gisu so much, he knows that ultimately, even though they are spending the money on food, they know it's all a sham, but they have to make sure the Shroud is there just to make sure the
Yes.
symbol of tradition, oppression should continue.
Yeah, quite right. And that's why Gisu knows that very well. It's very interesting that they know how the society functions, right? And which is why he says, I can even tell them that I dropped the money somewhere. What can they do? They can't do anything. Even if they don't believe their version, it's all right. Life will go on, right?
Another important thing is that I noted, I think, is that in this story, despite the fact that both the major characters are non-conformists, they don't conform to societal norms, but interestingly, when it comes to conversation between them, sometimes they seem to be maintaining this facade and this correctness. So when Buddha is dying inside, nobody is saying that why should we go. They're playing mind games with each other, and it's there in I think 3 or 4 instances in the conversation between them.
Yeah. As I said, ultimately it's like every man for himself. That's the bottom line for them. So even if it's father son, they worry only about the amount of food that goes in each each body's tummy. And I have mentioned this in my lecture as well. Food is a double-edged notion here. It is essential for survival, but at the same time that survival is at the cost of someone else. So this feast that they have is at the cost of the pain and sufferings of Buddha, whom they have exploited to the maximum. So that food that they enjoy, it comes at the cost of her life. So it's a very, very problematic aspect for them. So even though they are the fringes, even though they are scavenging, even though they are marginalized, even though they can be victims, they are also victimizers. So that needs to be, reinforced. That idea needs to be reinforced, and they cannot be forgiven for this selfish attitude.
But ma'am, there is a realization, I feel, at the end of the story, they say that Buddha will go to heaven for this. So
So,
there is a
I
a
will- I will-
Might be a
realization
way
about.
of them to sort
yeah,
of
definitely.
rationalize what they did.
Yeah.
So I would shelve that notion under the mind games that you have mentioned a little while ago. So these are the games, or these are the comfort talk that they utter to themselves to make sure that they are sane, and they carry on with their lives. So what are the other things? So we have talked about female oppression. We have talked about oppression because of belonging to particular communities. We have talked about the feudal landlords. We have also talked about Muttashi, the summer vacation story that we have talked about in the previous section. So we have talked about family being one of the problematic units that contains within itself lots of oppressions, right? And the funny thing is, some critics have wondered how on earth did Buddha land in this particular family, who in their sanest mind would offer their daughter to this particular set of men, right? And that's a question, regardless of the fact that how bad you are, you will ultimately get a female as a bride for you. So that thing is there in Indian society, right? So
And another interesting thing, which people might wonder, is when he says that I think 9 sons.
yes, that exaggeration. We don't know whether that's an exaggeration or a reality. What happened to the
the
9
other-
sons? We don't know. Did they all die as young children? We don't know. So that's a bit of speculation, a puzzle that's there. We don't know how to look at it. So how about the story Price of Bananas? Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Will Prajanan's story?
Sure, ma'am. But can we end with this note? Like,
Mhm.
what do you think of the criticism of the Shroud by the Dalit critics, that it actually?
Yeah, I have heard this criticism time and again about this story, and my interpretation is that I'm not convinced by that criticism, by that argument, because I also mentioned it in my lectures that Premchand is not a character, is not a writer who would quite sincerely reject the oppressions or the sufferings of this community, and he would not write a story about that. That is there, but leaving that reputation of Premchand as the champion of the underdogs aside, even within the story there are narrative moments which talks about why such psyches have been created. These psyches, the psyche of Gisu and Madhav, they are quite distorted psyches. They're quite monstrous psyches, right? And such psyches have been created because of, age-old oppressions, age-old exploitations, and there is a logic behind such a set of attitudes that these men have. So he is not pointing the finger of blame entirely at Gisu and Madhav. He is also pointing a big finger of blame at the landlords, at all the chieftains, and all the leaders of leaders of the society who have created these men. And we also need to remember these are extraordinary human beings within quotation marks. They are not the norm. Even within the Dalit communities, they are not the norm, right? So we need to see them as outcasts, real outcasts who are rebelling, as you pointed out, in a weird way at the injustices that have been heaped on them. So it's a rebellion, all right, but it's a very, very problematic rebellion which also exploits people who come under its clutches, such as Buddha. Right, so we need to look at it in a more broad-minded way, and I have also pointed out the extracts which talk about the activities or the behavior of the landlords, throughout the ages. So it's not a very, very convincing argument, at least in my interpretation. Okay.
Sure.
So shall we talk about the price of bananas?
Yeah, I actually wanted to compare the Sethi from Price of Bananas with Rambharose from Blue Umbrella. Because both of them are men of privilege.
Yes.
And they both are bad mouths, in the sense they use obscene language. But I guess we can see a difference in the sense of, Rambharose undergoes a transformation.
Yes.
But do we see that in the terms of Sethi? Like, do we see that And does he even get justice for the bad? Like, does he even get punishment, or just does is there justice in the end of the story? Because yeah, it's like okay, yeah, they make caricatures of him, and
Caricatures
then
of
they
him, yeah.
look at him with disgust. But is that really changing Seiji?
Yeah, it's a good comparison. I quite like the parallel you've drawn between Rambharose and Seiji. Akash, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I was also thinking when you were drawing that comparison that this realization is not there in the price of bananas. He doesn't realize that he has committed a mistake, and that's probably because he doesn't get a punishment, I believe. He,
So let's go back. Do you have a copy of that story? I have mentioned this extract time and again, but I want to go back to the argument that he makes, right, Seiji? Look at the way he reacts when the artist narrator says, give him one more Anna Seiji. He says, I said with a straight face. And he responds, the Seiji responds, you don't know, Sahib. You don't know these badmashes. They are in league with the monkeys. Bananas are two a pies. Fancy asking for an Anna for one rotten banana. So he has convinced himself that he has a valid rationale for rejecting or refusing to pay this man more money. Unlike the case of Rambharose, he is very, very convinced about his perspective on life, right? And that's a very, very warped way of looking at things, isn't it?
definitely so.
So let's talk more about the motivations of Seiji. Rambharose and Seiji are comparable in some respects, but they're also not comparable because this one, Rambharose, undergoes a wonderful transformation, right? He's known for being very, very greedy, very stingy, and despite that, he offers this girl a necklace, a silver necklace, a pricey one, right? It cost about 10 rupees, and he has to go to the town to get a bear claw made as a pendant for this particular necklace, for this silver chain, right? So he's willing to shell out a lot more money. So there's a combination of economics as well as traditional superstition, as well as a genuine warmth towards this little girl, and so many other things in the activities of Rambharose, which is very endearing to look at, and that is completely absent in the case of Seiji, but we can see human warmth in the figure of the fruit vendor, or the monkeys on the branches of the tree on the station, where they behave tenderly towards the young ones, and the fruit vendor tries to feed the monkeys with the bananas, that, and he also makes a living out of that. So tenderness do not come in association with Seiji. That's not there. So
Yeah.
that's
I
something.
mean, this parallel also brings out the caste divide in the society, and how the class divide in the society, and how upper class people look at the lower class people. And in the Blue Umbrella, it's not just Rambharose, but also when the story begins, and the family that Umbrella belongs to, how they look at it, that's also very striking.
Yeah, quite right. Sajana, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the point that you were also raising beforehand, about like the stark contrast between the characters of like all the other characters, the monkeys and the fruit vendor, and Seiji. In the word of they both use the word badmash.
Badmashes.
But badmashes is used in such an endearing way by the fruit vendor,
Yes.
and in such a insulting
way by
Right.
Seiji.
Yeah, so
Absolutely. And they are in league. He's kind of conflating human beings and monkeys together as one category, right? So that they become a community together, the fruit vendors and the monkeys, and Seiji becomes a class apart, a species apart, in fact, right?
It's a clever choice of words by Mulk Razan, definitely.
Yes, absolutely. And as I point out, tenderness doesn't seem to be associated with wealthy people, at least not in the literature that we read, right? There's not a lot of tenderness even in Muttashi. I mean, not obvious tenderness. She's very brusque, very abrupt, right? And she's a matriarch, and she has a lot of money and wealth and property. Of course, there is a softer side to her, but that's not very apparent, and that's not apparent in Seiji too, right? And that's not apparent in the landlord too, in the Shroud. And we have seen that he has also also beaten these two men several times. And so harshness, lack of empathy, sympathy, very, very autocratic behavior seem to be the characteristics of the upper, wealthier, economically very powerful sections in society. So those are the characteristics that we can kind of pick up on and stitch together to form a picture. Now, I'm sure that's a kind of a stereotype, but the stereotype is also played out time and again in our fiction.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, quite right.
Why do you think like the monkeys have been shown, to be caring for the young ones in such a tender way? Why do you think the author makes it very makes it known to the readers how loving the monkeys are being to one another?
Yeah. The funny thing that I noticed in that story, I mean, when you mentioned this point, is that there are no women, right? There's a complete absence of women in that story by Milkraj Anand, and that place has been taken by these monkey mothers, right? And the tendernesses, the gentle behavior are associated with the activities of these monkeys, the female monkeys. And the other figure, the fruit vendor, who really speaks tenderly to these monkeys, and he observes that these monkeys are hungry, which is why they disturb them, right? So he somehow makes excuses for these monkeys. Of course, he has an economic motive for feeding the monkeys, that's there. But apart from that, we can see a kind of a genuine relationship between these poor people. They seem to kind of be very noticing about the difficulties faced by their brethren within court. So empathy again seems to belong to a particular class of people, right? And not very evident in the other one. So the absence of women is very, very interesting, and I think that space has been taken up by these non-human characters. And characters from the lower classes as well. And even the artist figure is very, very empathetic. We need to talk about that, right? We have forgotten about the artist.
Yes,
He's very, very empathetic somehow, isn't it? And he stands up for the porter, he stands up for the fruit vendor. Do you want to comment on that, Akash?
Yes, ma'am, and it's a very the way he stands up is also sometimes it's very passive as well when he's drawing the caricature. It's not an active resistance to what Setji is doing, but it's very passive. But he's basically his aggression is coming out in a very passive way.
And he says that's the only weapon that I have, right? And when the other men in the compartment want to share that caricature with Setji himself, he says, no, let's not do it. So I don't know what are the motivations for not sharing that particular caricature with the Setji, whether he thinks that that's punishment enough, or he's genuinely of a broad-minded character who doesn't want to treat the Setji very harshly, and other things. So again, the passive interference is very, very interesting, because personally speaking, we would think that these characters need a bigger punishment, right, for harassing all these people who have served them. So that's my take on it.
Ma'am, do you think that the absence of a female figure in the story, especially in the Price of Bananas, is it also related to the fact that the divide between public and private life, and in public life there is not much role for the women to play?
Yes, very interesting remark there. What do you think, Sanjana? We have another railway station in Karma, right? And we have another railway station in Summer Vacation. We have the grandmother, crossing the borders there. She's very transgressive in that regard, right? And she tells the steward, I can take care of myself. I know all the details, you don't have to, give me all the information. Don't repeat yourself. And she's an exception, I would think.
That is definitely in stark contrast.
Yes, she's an exception. And Kerala, it has a different color. But Karma, we have Lakshmi, who's very, very passive, who accepts her position as a kind of a slave in that relationship between her husband and herself. And then what's the other railway station that we have? This one, isn't it? So you do have a point in terms of the larger theme about the gender roles and their attendant presences in public and private spheres. So the train station is a very, very public space, and women are not common figures on the platform. In fact, they're boxed in a separate compartment in the class Zenana, right? They're taken care of in a separate box, right? Zenana curtained off from prying public eyes, isn't it? So it's a nice comment, and again, I want to bring out the subtle subtext that's there. The artist figure, the fruit vendor, and the monkey, the female monkeys, they all somehow are stand-ins for the female presence because of the empathy, because we have the stereotype of the woman as being very, very sympathetic, very nurturing, very caring, and very giving, right? So the artist and all the other figures seem to be symbolic female presences in the story. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
They do add the feminine touch to the story. That is very interesting.
I think so too. What about games at Twilight? We have a mother figure, several mother figures, right? Isn't it? So it's a very, very interesting story, and somehow very different to the other stories. Why is it different to the other stories? Do you have something to say about it, Sancha?
One thing is maybe because major characters are urban children, which is not the same thing in same case with most other stories. They're in some sort of rural setting, and it's very interesting. It largely focuses on one character, and his time's not spent interacting with anyone, but mostly spent on his own. In his, alone in his fears and insecurities.
Very good observations. It's an urban setting, and the urban setting is not quite common in the text that we have chosen, and almost even in literature. So Indian literature is quite fascinated by the rural side of Indian life, right? And we have this cliche that India lives in the villages, continues to live in the villages, right? And that is reflected in Indian literature too. So we have for the first time an urban setting, and we have an upper class family which is represented in the story. Again, not very common in Indian literature, so that makes it really stand out. So we have a mother figure, and we have the child Ravi, and as you said, we live in his mind to a greater extent in the story. So the inner life, the psychic life of Ravi becomes expressed in the narrative to a greater extent, which is why it has a very, very psychological feel to it in terms of the themes that are discussed in the story. So what's your take on that?
Ma'am, so the most interesting part here is that not just it's an urban Indian setting, but it's an urban Indian setting of 20th century.
Yes.
So and probably sometime between mid 20th century to late 20th century, and I think the game of hide and seek they're playing is very interesting for me to note, at least, because like in 21st century it would be children sitting with their computers on and playing computer games.
Yes, quite right. Yeah, and again, it's vacation, summer vacation sort of ambience, right? That's there, and the children long to get out. So we have themes of confinement and wanting freedom or relief or release from incarceration. So that theme is there. So using the children as somehow symbolic figures, we can connect this story to larger issues, discourses of imprisonment, freedom, liberty, and all these issues, right? So that is quite there in that story. How about the sibling rivalry, the discontent that arises out of sibling rivalries and the hierarchies that become manifest? So these are some of the themes that are quite evident in the story as well. But the most important thing, at least to me, is to see the character of the mother in a different way, isn't it? Even when Ravi is hurt, not physically hurt, but emotionally hurt, we don't see that excessive gush of sympathy on the part of the mother, which is very, very odd, right? In Indian literature as well as in Indian society, because the stereotype is that as soon as something very minor happens to the child, the mother is very, very... Yes,
he's the youngest.
So the mother becomes very effusive. That's the stereotype, and she says, don't be a baby. Stop acting like a baby, and that's very, very
I think it also has something to do with the fact that her peace of mind has just been disturbed.
And the other thing is being very, very immature is looked down upon, frowned upon. So becoming mature at a very early age is supposed to be a good attribute,
Especially
right?
in urban centers.
Urban centers,
that.
right? When they want the children to be more independent, more mature, and not cry like a baby, and crying is somehow associated with feminine attributes, and the mother doesn't want that for the son, the younger son, isn't it? So that's also there. Lots of interesting themes with regard to death, growing up, the harsh realities of life are kind of blended in the themes of the story.
The interesting part for me about the story is the character of Ravi, definitely, and the fact that he consider himself an underdog who has to prevail, who must perform to
Yes.
prevail over all the others, and when he thinks he has prevailed, the bubble is burst. The
Yes.
bubble bursts there, right there, and he's like, no one is noticing.
Yes, yes, yeah. The pain is about being left out, rather than not becoming the winner. Initially, his aim was to become the winner, to be the champion, and later he realizes that nobody cares about his absence, and that becomes the hardest part to bear, right? The fact that you are left behind, and that's very, very symbolic. Again, it has thematic resonances about being forgotten by people that you love and care, right? So those themes are there too.
Yes, ma'am. It has a very striking parallel with life as well. I feel that if somebody works really hard in order to put other people behind and come first in something, and despite the fact that they are the underdogs and they have a disadvantage at the beginning, and they would feel definitely very disillusioned with the
Yes.
world when
Yes.
their triumph goes unnoticed by everyone else.
Yes, and that's also a trick on the part of society, right? Especially the people who have the power. That if you ignore somebody's success, you're defeating them again, right? You just don't notice the triumphs of the underdogs,
And they
life
lost
will-
in the victory, actually.
Yes. So it's a lost victory. You're quite right, and that hurts quite a lot, isn't it? That hurts quite. Again, the feudal setup where the elder sons get all the attention and prominence. That's also there as part of a theme of this particular story, and the younger ones are somehow left behind. They have to constantly prove themselves. And again, you can parallel the emotions of this young child with other characters who are in the margins. That can also be done, be it Shannon's dog, or be it Nani Amma, be it other characters such as Budya or Gisu and Madhav, or Lakshmi even. So all these can be connected thematically.
Like when you mentioned it, I can see parallels with In the Flood and the story of Ravi, because both of them are sort of forgotten in a way.
Yes, absolutely. Especially Chandon's dog,
Yeah, Chandon's
right?
dog.
It's very, very interesting moment in the story when the boat takes off, and with the entire family except the dog. Nobody notices the dog. We're just sniffing at a particular corner, and we can, as you rightly point out, draw a parallel between Chandon's dog and Ravi, because nobody notices. Even the mother, even the father who has come back from work doesn't notice the absence of the younger son. That's very, very abnormal. And that's very, very suggestive of dysfunctionality, or we can say that Anita Desai is really striving to make a point there, which is why he kind of sets up a scene where the parents also not notice this very young child, right? So that's very interesting, the comparison that you have drawn. And even when Chenan comes back, right, after a particular number of days, when the flood waters have receded, he's not very sure if it's his dog,
And
because it's
uses-
no longer
yeah.
recognizable.
And
Right?
he uses his feet
foot.
as if it's
Yeah,
as
exactly.
if it's so that I think that also has this theme of lack of compassion on his part.
Lack of compassion. Yes, again, you can connect it to games of Twilight where the other children say, "Why are you crying? Shush! Join the line. If you want to play with us, come on, play. Otherwise, stay quiet." Right? So that lack of empathy, and the funny thing is, the boy mimics death. The little boy mimics death when he lies on the ground as if he's hugging the earth, and we can again draw a parallel between Shannon's dog, which is somehow cradled by the shallow waters. There's a gentle rocking movement in the waters, right? So both these figures seem to go back to Mother Earth to draw sustenance, isn't it? So those symbolic resonances are there. What about Binya? Have you talked enough about Binya?
Yeah. So about the story Blue Umbrella, we can talk about like when she gets the blue umbrella from the memes up, starts from there where they're like, where they question why do you need this object of beauty, and it raises an interesting question like, this is something that she has gotten, but no one from the upper classes or upper castes are able to, like handle that object of beauty does not belong to them but belongs to a girl.
So it also it's somehow like, how can a poor person basically own something beautiful, or they think that they don't admire the aesthetics enough, so that
quite right. I mean, in fact, the Mem Sahib who gives away the umbrella, right, her question itself is interesting in that regard. She says, what cheek, how dare you ask for my umbrella? She's kind of taken aback by the fact that this little girl can appreciate the beauty of this blue umbrella, and that thing is that this wonder about a poor man or woman or child's appreciation of aesthetics runs through the entire set of in several cases, at least in our collection, right? So if we go back to Nani Amma, she wears a very nice ring, and Amu is attracted by it. So she asks, she says that she's fortunate to wear that ring, right? And even Amu asks, do crows know what's beautiful, right? Because she cannot reconcile the idea that these creatures can understand beauty, and that's a very symbolic idea, because that suggests that lower class people who are on the margins, are not able to appreciate the aesthetic things in life, right? And again, ultimately, that umbrella gets taken away from this little girl. It's as if Ruskin Bond himself doesn't allow this girl to enjoy the beauty, on her own. So that becomes, the umbrella becomes everybody's, umbrella ultimately. So she doesn't get to have it for her own, and that's quite sad. Right? And it's as if she goes back to nature. She kind of returns to Mother Nature to enjoy the beauties there. She sings and she runs along on the hillside, right? That's how the story ends. So it's almost as if, there is a message that these girls can't have all these things in life, all these man-made things at least.
What do you think of Binya's relationship with her brother, Biju?
Biju and Binya, very, very lovely set of siblings, because Biju always comes to the rescue of Binya, and and he brings her all these berries to eat, and she gives away the umbrella for a little while to hold. They walk back together, and then once there is this incident with the snake, she runs away in fear, and then everybody else, Biju, comes back to look for the snake and chase it away. All these things kind of establish a very lovely set of relationships, at least in that particular family, and that's something we haven't noticed so far, right? And he somehow acts like a hero for her, and he's the one who kind of overpowers Rajaram and gets the helps get her the umbrella. But what do you think?
You can also see instances where she really idolizes her brother, where she's like, she feels proud that she's as immune to nettles or as like how Biju used to be. She's like, I can climb trees as well as Biju. So she's always comparing and saying she considers her brother like the idol of the pinnacle.
The standard to which she kind of aspires and kind of equals him in all these physical activities as well. So that's very, very interesting. But have you noticed how the final struggle between Biju and Binya get played out? What do you make of that? These two boys fight with each other, right? Pretty fiercely.
Binya does not intervene.
True.
She goes to save her umbrella.
So her eye is caught by that object. That's very, slightly disturbing in some sense, at least, because she doesn't kind of intervene and take these, ask these boys to, stop it or nothing of that sort. She doesn't, help reconcile that conflict. On the other hand, she is kind of distracted by the umbrella, this object. So somehow perhaps she's being punished for that in when she loses the umbrella ultimately, or maybe Ruskin Bond takes away the the disturbing object that kind of, you know, prevents the basic humanity of Binyad to come forth. So all these things are there.
You can also take it as a reflection of gender roles where the boys are seen as to be violent and girls are not to interfere into that. It's a sort of man's business.
Yes, that's also there. But if you look at games at Twilight, we have Mira intervening when she kind of, you know, steps forward to stop the squabbles between the boys, right?
And but still, ma'am, in the story, it I think the author Anita Desai notes it as motherly Mira.
Motherly
the
Mira.
Metaphor is of the mother.
Motherly Mira. And the motherly Mira again doesn't acknowledge the emotional turmoil of this little boy Ravi at the end, right? So that stereotype gets smashed to smithereens, at least in 2 occasions in that particular story, right? So what are the other themes? Anything very striking that you want to talk about in terms of the other stories? Have you talked about the chess players?
No, not yet, ma'am.
Chess players. It's a very, very interesting story, isn't it? Let's talk about the women.
I think it's really like the 2 women could be seen as almost opposites of each other, because one Mirza's wife really wants to spend more time with him. She's very devoted, whereas Mir's wife, she's adulterous and she's seen as like the bad wife.
Yes.
You know, indulging in pleasure. And things like that.
Somehow they seem to be playing out the stereotypes, right? The extreme stereotypes, the clingy wife and the unfaithful wife. Isn't it? What do you think, Akash?
Yes, ma'am. It's this theme has been it's a recurrent theme in Indian literature, and the trope of basically unfaithful wife or basically adulteress, that's there, and then the trope of faithful perfect wife.
Yes.
What a woman should be. That's there. So I find it quite interesting.
Yeah, and this theme also comes up in a marginal way in Horse and Two Goats as well, by R.K. Narayan. Muni says that, you know, in a philosophical tone, you got to look after the wife, you got to keep an eye on the wife, otherwise, she will run away with another man. So all these themes are kind of there at the margins in all these Indian fiction.
So ma'am, the one thing that actually sets Satranj Ki Khiladi or the chess players apart from all the other stories that we have read, that it doesn't have much of a mention of the lower strata of the society. It deals with the aristocracy.
Yes.
And that has been missing in most of the stories, that how the aristocrats lived. And
And it captures really the collapse of the power as well as the moral compass of the aristocrats, right? They're crumbling from the inside.
It's a time of Wajid Ali Shah, and it's all it's on unsettling, unraveling.
And especially this particular story captures the decadence rather than the height of art and culture. It captures just the decadent perspective of that particular period, isn't it?
Indulgence, overindulgence, maybe.
Overindulgence, and that seems to be the cause of the fall of Oudh of Lucknow. It falls quite easily, without any kind of rebellion on the part of the local rulers or the local populace. It was a very, very easy victory for the British. That's the sense that we get from the story, isn't it?
You can see that the people in power, they live their lavish lives, but don't really step up on the plate to do their duties.
Yes.
They're only living in decadence. They only have that good aspects of their whatever comes with their nobility, their position in society, but they're not willing to actually do what is necessary when it's time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you connect the dots with history, actually, I think that with these two aristocrats, Premchand is also basically trying to showcase what the rule of Wajid Ali Shah was like, because Wajid Ali Shah's character is also described. I think there are very striking parallels between the historical character of Wajid Ali Shah and then these two men.
Absolutely. And the most important thing is that there is a political indifference on the part of these two aristocrats, and as you pointed out, they refuse to do their duty. They refuse to fulfill the social contract, right, that they have with their lords, isn't it? And what do you make of the political indifference and their obsession with chess playing, which ultimately leads to their deaths? There is a big contrast between these two, right? They're not cowards, and that's proved, isn't it? So what do we make of that?
We can see how like chess is inherently like quite a political strategy game, but they're not willing to put it into their real life. They're only immersed in the game, and the only thing that they care about ultimately we see is their egos. Like
Yes.
they're indifferent to everything else except when their egos come into play.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's quite important.
Yes, absolutely. So,
Yeah,
what
it's-
is very, very pressing, important for them is their attraction to their own lineage rather than their loyalty to their feudal lord, right? So, in order to protect their personal family honor, they fight a battle between themselves and they die, right? So, their loyalties become very, very narrow, very, very personal, very, very self centered, and very, very egoistical, right? So they're not connected to larger political issues at all, isn't it? So that seems to be the central,
And
message.
the very interesting thing to note here is that the chessboard can be seen in connection with the basically what the country was undergoing at that time, and the turmoil that was happening in basically the real battles. So that's interesting. But then these two gentlemen
Yeah.
are totally isolated with those battles, and their egos are being played out
Absolutely.
on the chessboard.
Absolutely.
And but it materializes in real deaths rather
Yes.
than losing the chase game.
True, true. And it's very symbolic that the woman throws the chessboard away, isn't it? Mirza's wife does that, and that's a very interesting moment in the story. And she somehow rejects the public face of Mirza, because the public face of Mirza seems to be chess playing in the story. So that rejection is made very, very clear and strongly by Mirza's wife there. So again, how aristocratic connections are kind of dismantled, how connections to your land, to your family, to your nation get unraveled is quite evident in this particular story, and people become very, very narrow-minded. So that seems to be the major message of this particular story.
The closing line of the story, actually, you can see it in the connection with basically the situation in the country, or in Oudh, actually, specifically, around that time as well. It reads, "Silence reigned all around. The broken arches, the ruined walls, and dust-laden pillars of the mosque were watching these corpses and cursing their fate."
Yes.
It's exactly like what happens after a battle, and people who have died, their corpses lying.
Yes.
It's just these two people here, but Premchand
Absolutely.
has tried to draw that analogy really well.
Yeah, that
beautifully.
battlefield ambience is brought about in those lines, right? And these people have failed, all these mosques, these people have failed their duty, right, to their battlefield, to the kings, to the society at large. So, and that becomes manifested, and the broken arch is very, very powerful
Imagery.
image that are there at the end of the story, right? So on that note, shall we come to a closure about the conversations that we have had? So thank you for watching. I hope that you really had a good time listening to our conversation about some of the major themes that cut across all these stories. Thank you for watching.